you can use any steroid, off-season or pre-contest. Why do we use MASTERON, Winstrol, pre-contest? I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
Anyway, so he said he recently had a CT scan for a possible hernia, been having nagging discomfort pain in the area below where the appendix used to be. During the scan, they found scattered lesions in my pancreas, largest 8 millimeters. Blood work came back with my lipase doubled. At a minimum, it's looking like mild acute pancreatitis. Still have an MRI to do. But in the meantime, what can I do diet-wise? I've been using Fiberlife religiously for years, and number two has been solved for something. So, which leads me to believe that the problem being present for some time in pain is from that and not hernia, although scans show small hernias on both sides, but pain only on one side.
Yeah, I mean, below the appendix line, that's usually like called a femoral hernia because it runs along the femoral, artery there, vein. So he obviously has some hernias there that might need to be fixed. The pancreas thing, obviously, he obviously was not hurting there because he said the pain was below the appendix line. So that's like almost in your groin area there. So the appendix is up like around under your stomach. So if he's got some pancreatitis, lesions don't really sound so great on the, you can have pancreatitis where it's inflamed, but lesions worry me a little bit more. I would make sure he gets a CT scan with contrast or an MRI to really get a good visual look at that pancreas. I mean, Greg has pancreatitis. Greg Valentino, we all know that, but his was caused by a blockage. He had a gallstone in his greater papilla duct, which is the duct where the pancreas and the gallbladder kind of feed into the intestinal tract. So that's why he got pancreatitis from backup, but he doesn't have lesions on his pancreas. So the lesion thing kind of worries me a little bit. Like I said, I don't know what would have caused that. So he definitely should follow up and take that very, very seriously because the pancreas is not something you want to mess around with. And if it does develop into something worse, pancreatic pain is really brutal. You can ask Greg Valentino what he's going through right now. He's on some major pain meds. And so we don't want to see that develop into anything. It's always better to get a CT scan and check it out. I was noticing the other day, like I can almost feel like my stomach emptying into my intestinal tract. Like I feel like dripping, drip. And I'm like, you know what? I got to get a CT scan. I'm a hypochondriac, but you know what? I'd rather be safe than sorry. And that's, I think, my advice to you out there, who put forth this question. Go get a CT scan. It doesn't hurt to find out.
Let's go to NY Bigger. I heard you mention before that you took testosterone prior to ankle fusion surgery to make sure it heals properly. Can you expound on the healing effects of testosterone, and should people take testosterone prior to certain types of procedures?
Yeah, we know that testosterone increases bone density. I mean, that's a pretty established, benefit of it. And that's really what I was worried about. Because when they do an ankle fusion, if the thing doesn't fuse, they got to cut your ankle off. They got to cut your foot off. And so that would not be an option for me. Okay. I know some people don't mind. Some people are like, oh, cut it off and you'll have a prosthetic. You'll be much better. I'm like, no, that's all right. I'm a little too vain. I think I'll keep my ankle. And so, testosterone definitely has a bone strengthening effect. It also obviously increases muscle mass and it helps recovery. It makes you stronger. So, I mean, every benefit you could possibly want in a situation where you're having some kind of a surgical event, especially an orthopedic surgical event. was good. Now, interestingly, when I had my shoulders replaced, I didn't use any testosterone replacement because remember, I was still in the process of having my kids at the time. So I didn't want to mess up my fertility. Now, I was on HCG, which obviously raised my natural levels to reasonable, respectable amounts and obviously helped me heal. Had I taken testosterone, I probably would have healed faster, I'm sure. But you do what you got to do. So I definitely would advocate the use of that. And you know what? I really like the healing peptides, BPC 157 and TB 500. Unfortunately, now the rejuvenation clinics and the life extension clinics can't prescribe them anymore. So that's I mean, unfortunately, the only place to get them is through like these gray market peptide websites. But they definitely work. And of course, GH works too. I didn't use any growth hormone because remember, I had thyroid cancer. So I was a little worried about that. I don't want to, if I had any dormant cells, I don't want to stimulate anything. But GH with the testosterone would have probably been a better combination for sure.
We do get a lot of insulin related questions. How much insulin needs to be used and for how long to see the size gaining anabolic effects?
I mean, we get this. This is like probably one of the most common questions we get. When I talk about insulin usage, I really been talking about it from a health perspective because, I view insulin use a lot differently today than I did 20 years ago when I was experimenting for the first time with it in 1995, because no one really knew. I felt like everyone else does today who doesn't really understand insulin. I felt that, if you take extra insulin, you're going to grow better. But I knew that for some reason I wasn't absorbing my food properly because I was eating like an enormous amount of food and I wasn't gaining any weight. So I said, something must be. The only reason I wouldn't absorb my food is I didn't have enough insulin present. And no one had blood sugar monitors back then. So who knows what my blood sugar was, I was eating 1,000 grams of carbs a day, and probably my fasting sugar was probably high. And when your fasting blood sugars are high, that's basically telling your body that, you know what, we don't have enough insulin here to absorb this stuff. Or it could mean you don't have enough insulin sensitivity, meaning you don't have enough insulin receptors. But I've gone through this before. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing. Bodybuilders have great insulin sensitivity because we work out, we eat fish, we take supplements that make us insulin sensitive. So we have good insulin receptors. The only thing that makes us a little insulin resistant would be GH, right? So the problem for bodybuilders is we don't have enough insulin. So if our blood sugars are not doing well, it's because there's not enough insulin around. Our bodies can't produce enough insulin. It's not because there's not enough insulin receptors. So it's silly to take, metformin and all these other drugs that help potentiate your own insulin. You need extra insulin. The question is, how do you do it? Do you take a fast-acting insulin or do you take a long-acting insulin? Back in the day, there really was no long-acting insulin available. No one knew anything about it anyway. So I took what was available from the pharmacy, which was at the time Humulin R, which was really not a super fast-acting. It was kind of like a middle of the road. You got 2 peaks from it. You took it, you got an initial peak. If you took 10 IUs, you got 5 IUs were released initially, and then 2 hours later, you got the other 5 IUs. So it kind of had like a delayed effect. And I would take 2 shots of that a day, so it would basically cover 4 meals for me. All right, so it wasn't bad. And that was, once again, we didn't know what we were doing back then. Nowadays, if you're running high fasting blood sugars first thing in the morning, over 90, okay, but your 2-hour post meals are under 130, which is what they should be, meaning that that means your mealtime insulin use production is good. It's just overnight you're having the problem, and that's what's called first phase insulin failure. So that means your body's giving you signals. Hey, buddy, we don't have enough insulin present, and the way we're letting you know that is in the morning your fasting sugars are too high. If you wait until the post meal sugars get too high, then you're kind of screwed. Then you're going to be really, really have a lot of damage to your beta cells of your pancreas. So we don't want to get there. So when fasting start getting high, we put a long acting in there. And what that's doing, it's like putting you on testosterone replacement, except we're putting you on insulin replacement, essentially. We're giving your body the insulin that it can't produce, okay? And we're bringing your body up to speed. So now let's say your pancreas was 10% deficient in insulin production. It couldn't produce 10%. You needed 10% more. Now we put that in there by taking a supplemental form of it. Now your body is producing enough insulin. You're waking up. Your blood sugars are under 90. Corrected the problem. Now, if we have a person that tends to get fat real easily, and you do this to them and put them on the long-acting insulin, you're going to see they get leaner. They're going to grow better because now they're absorbing their food more efficiently. However, in some people, like who have a very fast metabolism, you do like me, you could put the long-acting insulin and fix that problem, but you still might not see muscle growth because I'm eating so many grams of carbs so many times a day because I got such a fast metabolism, but I'm not really absorbing my meals as efficiently. And someone like me might also need a fast-acting insulin, whether you use like a Novolog, Humalog, which is super fast-acting, or you use the old the R form, Novolin R or Humulin R, which gives you the 2 peaks. Either one of those works fine. That will just help that type of a person with a very fast metabolism like myself to gain weight from the insulin. I'm going to get a benefit. If you give that to someone who tends to get fat easily, you know what happens? They get fatter because they don't really need that extra insulin. So it's not one size fits all. You got to figure out what the physique you're working with. And this is things, by the way, if you like this conversation and this is resonating with you, like, wow, this is good information. This is the type of stuff I'm going to talk about in the Secrets to Becoming a Diet Guru this Saturday. And if you like this, I talk about everything is this involved. The science of everything. Nutrition, diet. I break down everything on a scientific level so you understand why you're doing what you're doing. And that's the most important thing. It's not just knowing what to do, it's understanding why you're doing it. That's what we're in this for. We want knowledge. They don't teach this in school. You can't go to college for this, okay? This is the college. I'm teaching you college here. But that's how you figure out what kind of insulin you give a person. Everyone can't do the Milos approach. But if Milos does that on someone with a fast metabolism like me, it works, right? Because we don't get fat, people like me. We just get bigger. You do that with someone who's a fatty, and they're going to be a fat slob, a bloated fat slob on that much insulin. So you have to know who you're dealing with, and that's why every person needs to be assessed as an individual. You can't do a one-size-fits-all for insulin. For steroids, you can do that, not for insulin.
G-Hole community, do you see any benefits to adding Masteron in an off-season cycle?
The truth of the matter is you can use any steroid, off-season or pre-contest. Why do we use Masteron, Winstrol, pre-contest? By convention, really. Usually in the off-season, we'll use long-acting injectables, okay, because we get a better, longer duration out of them. They're less toxic, and the person's eating an enormous amount of food. They're a little softer anyway, so it doesn't really matter if they hold a little extra water. So we'll use our DECA with testosterone. We'll use EQ with testosterone. We'll use Dianabol with testosterone. And then usually as we get closer to the show, the last 6 to 8 weeks, we'll switch to compounds that maybe don't hold quite as much water. We're going to still keep our testosterone in there as our base, but we'll use Winstrol. We'll use Masteron. We'll use Anavar. We'll use Primabone because they just don't hold as much fluid. So the lean physique looks a little drier. I mean, I know guys that have no money and they've used testosterone alone for pre